Welcome. Tonight, I'll be sharing 3 true scary stranger stories. Quiet, believable tales of people who found themselves face to face with something deeply unsettling. These aren't stories of ghosts or monsters, but of strangers, the kind that appear in the dark when you least expect it, and stay in your mind long after they're gone. So, find a safe place to listen. Dim the lights. Let your thoughts slow down. And remember, sometimes, the scariest thing isn't what's hiding in the dark, it's who's standing just beyond the light. Our first story comes from a traveler who made a simple stop for gas late one night, in a quiet place under a flickering light, where a stranger's stillness became something far more terrifying than it first seemed. Story 1. The Man by the Gas Station underscore 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 underscore. I don't usually tell this story. Not because I'm afraid of it anymore, but because whenever I try to put it into words, I can't still feel the same quiet dread I felt that night. It happened about 10 years ago, when I was in my early 20s, driving home from a small town wedding that had run later than expected. It was one of those long summer nights where the air is warm and heavy, and the roads are empty except for the occasional truck coming in the distance. I had about a 2-hour drive ahead of me, most of it through rural backroads, quiet stretches of farmland, forests, and long open fields. I wasn't in a rush. I had music playing softly, the windows cracked open, and the world felt almost too still. That kind of peaceful stillness that slowly becomes unsettling the longer you notice it. Underscore 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 underscore. The first sign about an hour into the drive, I realized I needed gas. The gauge had dropped lower than I thought, and the next town wasn't 4 miles. Luckily, I spotted a faded sign at the edge of the road. Gas, food, 3 miles. 3 miles later, I found it. The small, old gas station that looked like it hadn't changed in decades. A single flickering light hung over the pumps, casting a pale yellow glow. Behind the station was a dark tree line that seemed to swallow everything past it. I pulled in, shut off the engine, and for a moment, I just sat there. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. Then I noticed something. There was a car parked off to the side, near the edge of the lot. The dark blue sedan. It looked empty at first, but as my headlights swept over it, I saw someone inside. Just sitting there. Underscore 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 underscore. The man in the car. At first, I assumed it was someone else traveling late, maybe resting before hitting the road again. But the longer I looked, the stranger it seemed. The person wasn't reclined or asleep. He was sitting upright in the driver's seat, facing forward, hands on the wheel, perfectly still. I turned away quickly, pretending not to notice, and got out to start the pump. The air was warm but carried that cool edge that comes before dawn. I could hear a few insects, the hum of the pump, and nothing else. When I glanced back, the man's head was turned slightly, just enough that I could tell he was looking at me. It sent a small ripple of unease through me. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe he was just zoning out. Still, I couldn't shake it. Underscore 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 inside the gas station. I decided to go inside and grab a drink while the tank filled. The store was dimly lit, and the clerk, the tired-looking older man, barely looked up when I walked in. There was that faint, old smell of oil and coffee that never leaves places like that. As I wandered the aisles, I noticed there was a security mirror above the counter. In the reflection, through the front windows, I saw the blue sedan, and the man was now standing outside it. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket, and his face was half hidden in shadow. He wasn't doing anything, just standing beside the car, looking in my direction. My heart started to thump harder. I tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence, that he was stretching his legs, but the way he stood there, completely still, facing the store, made me feel like I was being watched. I grabbed a bottle of water and approached the counter. The clerk rang it up slowly, and I remember asking, trying to sound casual, if that man outside came in earlier. He frowned slightly, like he hadn't noticed anyone. When I pointed, he leaned a bit to look through the glass. The man was gone. Probably someone passing through, the clerk muttered. But something in his voice told me he wasn't entirely sure either. Underscore 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 the empty road. I paid, went back to my car, and looked around. No one was there. The blue sedan was still parked in the same spot, door closed, no sign of movement. I got in quickly, locked the doors, and pulled out of the lot. For a few miles, I didn't see another car. Just darkness, trees, and the soft hum of my tires on the asphalt. I started to feel foolish for being so tense. But then, in my rearview mirror, the pair of headlights appeared. They were distant at first, maybe half a mile back. I didn't think much of it. But as the road curved and stretched on, I noticed that the lights seemed to be matching my every turn, every slowed bend. It's a weird thing, how your body can tell something's wrong before your mind catches up. I slowed down slightly. The headlights slowed too. I sped up. They did the same. It was a dark, narrow road, no houses, no shoulder, just woods on both sides. That was when the realization hit me like ice. It was the blue sedan. underscore 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 underscore. The following at first, I told myself I was imagining it, but when I reached a straight stretch of road and glanced in the mirror, I saw the shape clearly under the headlights. Same car. Same color. He was following me. I tried to stay calm. I kept driving, my hands gripping the wheel a little too tightly. I didn't want to pull over, and I didn't want to lead him to my home either. About 15 minutes later, I saw a sign, next exit, 5 miles. If I could make it there, I could reach the small diner that stayed open all night. I focused on the road ahead, refusing to look in the mirror, even though every instinct told me to. When I finally reached the exit, I turned sharply onto the ramp. For a second, I thought the car might keep going, but it didn't. It followed. The sound of gravel under both our tires filled the night. Underscore 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 underscore. The diner's neon sign was like a beacon in the dark. It sat alone at the edge of the exit, a small, glowing box surrounded by empty parking spaces. I pulled in fast and parked near the entrance. I didn't even bother shutting off the engine. Inside, a few truckers sat at the counter, and an older waitress was refilling coffee cups. When I stepped through the door, the sound of the bell above it was almost too loud. I turned, half expecting to see the blue sedan right behind me. It wasn't there. I could see through the windows. The parking lot was empty except for my car. I tried to steady my breathing, ordered coffee I didn't need, and sat where I could watch the window. For a while, nothing happened. Then, maybe 10 minutes later, headlights appeared again. They pulled into the lot slowly. The blue sedan stopped at the far edge, the engine still running, lights aimed toward the diner. No one got out. The waitress noticed me glancing out the window and frowned. "You okay, hon?" she asked softly. I nodded, but my voice came out quiet. "Do you see that car?" She looked, then shrugged. Probably just another traveler. But even she kept her eyes on it a moment too long. Underscore 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 underscore. The stranger comes closer. For the next half hour, I sat there pretending to drink my coffee while keeping my focus on that car. The driver's silhouette was visible, just sitting there, motionless again. Around 3 a.m., one of the truckers paid his bill and left. I watched as he stepped outside, walked to his rig, and glanced at the sedan. Later, he came back in. "Weird guy out there," he muttered to the waitress. "Didn't move an inch when I walked by. Just stared straight ahead." That confirmed it. It wasn't just in my head. A few minutes later, I quietly asked the waitress if there was a back exit. She nodded, led me behind the counter, and pointed toward the kitchen door that opened onto a small alleyway. "Be careful," she said. "This area gets strange folks sometimes." I thanked her, walked out the back, and got into my car through the opposite side of the lot. When I started the engine, I kept the lights off and drove slowly away, keeping low behind the row of parked trucks until I reached the road again. When I finally glanced in the mirror, the sedan was still there. But this time, I saw the door open. Underscore 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 the face in the light. For the first time, I saw his face, or part of it. He stepped out, tall and thin, his features barely lit by the headlights. His expression was blank, almost empty. He looked straight at me as I turned onto the highway, and though I was already speeding away, that image burned itself into my mind. I don't remember much of the next hour, just the blur of road and the constant fear that he was still behind me. But he never appeared again. No more headlights. No more car. By the time I reached home, the sun was rising. I parked in front of my building, sat there for a few minutes, and tried to process what had happened. It didn't feel real, like I'd slipped through some quiet nightmare that left no trace behind. Underscore 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 underscore. In the aftermath, a few days later, I called the gas station to ask if they had cameras or had seen the blue sedan again. The clerk I spoke to didn't sound surprised. "Yeah," he said. "That car's been around here before. Always late at night. Driver never buys gas. Just parks there for a while and leaves." I asked if anyone knew who he was. The clerk paused. Then he said something that still chills me every time I think about it. "The first time we noticed that car," he said slowly, "was about 3 months ago. Same make, same color. A woman stopped here and said a man in a blue sedan followed her from the next town. She never made it home." There was a long silence between us. Then he added, almost under his breath, "You're lucky you stopped at that diner." Underscore 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 reflection. Even now, when I drive at night, I sometimes find myself checking the mirrors too often, watching the headlights behind me for just a little too long. You tell yourself it won't happen again, that people like that are rare. But the truth is, you never really know who's out there. Maybe they're sitting by some quiet gas station right now, waiting. Or maybe they're already behind you, just far enough back that you haven't noticed yet. And sometimes, that's the scariest part, not what they do, but how long they've been watching before you ever realize they're there. Sometimes, the road itself feels endless, until something breaks that silence. Our second story follows a woman who stopped for just a moment to rest, and realized she wasn't alone at the highway rest stop. Story 2. The rest stop window underscore 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 underscore. There's something about long drives at night that can make the world feel hollow. Like the darkness stretches too far, and everything outside the reach of your headlights doesn't quite exist. This story happened about 6 years ago, when I was driving back to my parents' house for the holidays. I'd been working a late shift and decided to hit the road around midnight, figuring I could beat the morning traffic. It was a 6-hour drive, mostly through empty highway and patches of forest that swallowed radio signals whole. By 2 in the morning, I was getting tired. Not exhausted, just that quiet kind of fatigue that makes your mind wander and your eyes heavy. I told myself I'd stop at the next rest area for some air and maybe a coffee from a vending machine. When I finally saw a small green sign that read rest area, 1 mile, I felt oddly relieved. Underscore 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 underscore. The rest stop. The place looked ordinary enough. 2 vending machines under a flickering light, a few picnic tables, and a small building with bathrooms that hummed under fluorescent bulbs. There were only 2 cars parked there, one near the far end, and a large white pickup truck closer to the restrooms. I pulled into a space near the middle, cut the engine, and sat for a moment. The night was still. Too still. The only sounds were the ticking of my cooling engine and the faint hum of bugs circling the lights. I could feel that weird tension that comes from being the only person awake in miles of darkness. I grabbed some change from the console and stepped out. The air smelled like damp earth and fuel. As I approached the vending machines, I noticed movement in the reflection of the glass. Someone was standing near the truck. Underscore 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 underscore. The stranger by the truck. He was tall, wearing a hoodie pulled up over his head, and facing away from me, or at least I thought he was. He stood beside the open door of the truck, motionless, one hand resting on the frame. I told myself he was probably just stretching or getting something from the cab, but he didn't move. Even after several seconds, he stayed completely still. The feeling of being watched crept up my neck. I pressed a few coins into the machine, pretending not to notice him, and picked a bottle of water just to have an excuse to leave quickly. When the bottle dropped, the sound echoed too loud in the night. I picked it up, turned, and froze. The man had shifted. He was now standing a few feet away from his truck, angled toward me. Still not moving, but this time his head was tilted, just slightly. like he was trying to see my face in the half-light. Underscore 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 the encounter. I didn't want to panic. I reminded myself it was late. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was just zoning out. But my body didn't believe my mind. My pulse was already quickening, and the stillness around us felt heavier than before. I started walking back to my car, trying to act casual. That's when I heard it, soft footsteps behind me. I turned my head slightly. The man had started walking too, slow and measured, keeping about 10 feet between us. His steps stopped whenever mine did. Something deep inside me screamed to run, but I forced myself to stay calm. If I ran, I'd look afraid, and maybe that was what he wanted. When I reached my car, I fumbled for the keys, trying not to show how much my hands were shaking. The sound of gravel crunching behind me grew louder. Then, the voice. Low, almost polite. "Hey, you traveling alone?" I didn't answer. I got the door open, slid inside, and hit the lock. He stopped by the front of my car, standing just outside the glow of my headlights. All I could see was a faint reflection of his face, pale, tired eyes and the edge of a crooked smile. He raised a hand slowly and tapped on the hood, twice. Tap, tap. Underscore 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 the window. I started the engine. He didn't move. Then he walked around to my window, leaning just close enough that I could see his breath fog against the glass. He bent slightly, peering in, and spoke again, voice calm, almost friendly. "You shouldn't drive this late," he said. "People disappear on these roads." The way he said it, not like a warning, but like a fact, made my stomach drop. I kept my eyes forward, hands gripping the wheel, pretending I couldn't hear him. He tapped the glass slightly. "You got far to go." My mind was racing. I thought about honking, about backing up, but I was terrified he'd do something before I could move. Then, just as suddenly as he'd appeared, he straightened up. He smiled, not kindly, but in a way that said he knew I was afraid. Then he turned and walked slowly back toward the truck. Underscore 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 the chase. I didn't wait to see what he'd do next. I threw the car into reverse and sped out of the lot, tires kicking gravel behind me. When I glanced in the mirror, I saw him standing beside his truck, watching my tail lights fade. I drove faster than I should have, trying to put as much distance between us as possible. The highway was empty, endless, and silent. About 10 minutes later, I looked back again, and my blood ran cold. Headlights. Bright, white headlights, coming up fast. It could have been anyone, I told myself. But as the car drew closer, I saw it in the mirror, the same white pickup. Underscore 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 the road through the woods for the next half hour. The truck stayed behind me. Not close enough to tailgate, but close enough to make sure I knew it was there. Whenever I slowed down, it slowed down too. When I sped up, it matched me. The road eventually curved through a thick forest, and the darkness deepened. That's when the truck's headlights suddenly switched off. For a few seconds, there was nothing behind me but blackness. No light. No sound. Then, out of nowhere, I saw it again, closer this time. It had drifted up to just a few car lengths behind me, headlights off, only visible in flashes of moonlight breaking through the trees. I remember whispering to myself, over and over, "Stay calm, stay calm, stay calm." Underscore 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 the gas station. After what felt like forever, I saw an exit sign. A small gas station sat just off the road, its bright lights cutting through the dark like a promise. I took the exit too fast, nearly skidding. As soon as I pulled in, I parked right under the main floodlight near the building and ran inside. There was a young attendant behind the counter. He looked up, startled, as I came in. "Are you okay?" he asked. I turned to point outside. The lot was empty. The truck was gone. Underscore 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 the police. The attendant called the local police for me, and 2 officers showed up about 15 minutes later. They listened quietly as I told them everything: the man, the tapping, the chase. One of them, an older cop with gray in his beard, nodded slowly. Then he said something I'll never forget. "We've had reports like this before. Always around this stretch of highway. Same description: tall man, white pickup, rest stops late at night." I asked if they'd ever caught him. The officer shook his head. "Sometimes the stories end like yours," he said softly. "Sometimes they don't." Underscore 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 the ending. They offered to escort me to the next town, but I decided to stay the night at a nearby motel. I barely slept, jumping at every sound from the parking lot. By morning, it almost felt unreal, like a bad dream. But when I went out to my car, I found something that made my stomach twist. On the driver's side window, faintly visible in the morning light, was a handprint. Large, clear, and pressed flat against the glass, right where he had leaned in. I don't drive at night anymore. Not alone. Not through that stretch of highway. And sometimes, when I think about that calm voice saying people disappeared on these roads, I can't help but wonder, was he warning me? Or was he disappointed I got away? And finally, not all encounters happen far from home. Some happen right where you should feel safest. This last story is about a quiet night, a single knock, and a stranger who waited just beyond the porch light. Underscore 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 story 3. The stranger in the driveway underscore 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 underscore. It's strange how sometimes the scariest moments don't happen on the road, or in the woods, or deep in the night, but right outside your own home. This story happened about 3 years ago, in late autumn. I was living alone then, a small house at the edge of town, with a long gravel driveway that wound through a patch of trees. It wasn't isolated exactly, but at night, the distance between houses made it feel that way. I'd gotten used to the quiet. The kind of quiet that hums just under the sound of your breathing. The kind that makes you think every creak of wood or shift of wind means something. I didn't mind it, though. At least not until that night. Underscore 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 underscore. The first knock hit started around 11. I was in the living room, half watching an old show, the kind of background noise that helps you drift toward sleep. Outside, the wind had picked up, whistling softly through the trees. Then came a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, thud, 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 on the front door. It startled me because no one ever came by that late. I muted the TV, waited, listening. Nothing. No follow-up, no footsteps, no sound of a car. After a minute, I got up and peeked through the peephole. The porch light was on, glowing pale against the night, but there was no one there. Just the empty stretch of gravel and the dark line of trees. I stood there a moment, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Maybe it was the wind rattling something loose. Maybe the wood had settled. I went back to the couch, pressed play again, and tried to forget it. underscore 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 underscore. The second time, about 10 minutes later, there was another knock. This time softer, almost hesitant. Thud, thud. I froze. It was definitely the door. When I looked again through the peephole, there was someone standing there now, the tall figure, mostly shadowed under the edge of the porch light. They weren't moving, just standing perfectly still, head tilted slightly downward. From what I could make out, they were wearing a long coat, and their hands hung straight at their sides. I couldn't see their face. Something about the way they stood, too still, too deliberate, made my stomach twist. I didn't open the door. Instead, I turned off the inside light and watched quietly from the window beside the entryway. The figure didn't move for almost a full minute. Then, without a sound, they stepped backward into the dark and disappeared from view. Underscore 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 underscore. The phone call. I locked every door and window in the house after that. Then I called a friend who lived nearby, just to talk, to calm down. I told her what happened, tried to laugh it off, but even over the phone she could tell I was rattled. She told me to call the police, but I hesitated. What would I even say? That someone knocked twice and left? After we hung up, I checked the porch again. Still empty. I told myself I'd imagined the worst of it, maybe just someone at the wrong address. But deep down, I knew something felt off. Underscore 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 underscore. The footsteps around midnight. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard it. Gravel crunching outside. Soft, slow steps, not hurried, not heavy, like someone walking just past the window. I turned off the lights, every muscle in my body tense. The sound moved from one side of the house to the other, steady and unhurried. Then it stopped. I waited, barely breathing. My eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light from the stove clock. When I finally worked up the nerve to peek through the blinds, I saw nothing. But I noticed something else. Faint marks near the edge of the gravel driveway. Footprints. Not deep enough to be boots, not large enough for heavy shoes. Just a single trail of steps leading up to the porch, then back toward the trees. Underscore 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 underscore. The doorbell at 12:47. The doorbell rang. Not a knock this time. just a single chime that echoed too loud in the silence. The sound startled me so much I dropped the mug I was holding. My heart was pounding, and for a long moment I couldn't move. I didn't want to look, didn't want to see if the figure was back. But I forced myself to peek through the peephole again. No one, just the empty porch. I started to step away when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Something shifting near the edge of the trees. Someone was standing there. Too far to see clearly, but close enough that I could make out the shape of a person, head turned toward the house, not moving. Watching. Underscore 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 the power outage. I backed away from the door and grabbed my phone to call 911. But before I could even unlock it, the lights flickered, once, twice, and went out completely. The house fell into total darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of my phone screen. I remember whispering to myself, "Stay calm. Just stay calm." But my hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I managed to call the police, whispering to the operator that someone was outside my house. She told me to stay inside, stay on the line, and lock myself in the room until officers arrived. I went into the bedroom and shut the door quietly, sitting on the floor with my back against the wall. Every creak in the wood made me flinch. And then, there was another sound. The doorknob at the front of the house, turning slowly. Underscore 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 the way it didn't open. Whoever it was, they didn't force it. Just tested it. Then stopped. I could hear faint breathing. Not mine, not from inside, but outside the thin front wall of the house. It was uneven, slow, almost like whoever it was enjoyed standing there, listening. The operator was still on the phone, her calm voice trying to reassure me that police were on their way. But I could barely answer her. Then, after what felt like hours but was probably minutes, the breathing stopped. I strained to listen. Silence. Then, gravel. The sound of footsteps receding down the driveway. And then nothing. Underscore 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 the arrival. The power came back just as the red and blue lights flashed through the windows. 2 officers checked the property, the woods, the porch, but whoever had been there was gone. One of them found the footprints, faint but visible, leading from the driveway to the porch and back again. He followed them a little way into the trees before shaking his head. Whoever it was, they knew where to step, he said quietly. Didn't leave much trace. They took my statement and stayed until I felt calm enough to breathe again. Before leaving, one officer, A woman with kind eyes looked at me and said, "Don't ignore knocks like that. Sometimes people test houses before breaking in. You did the right thing." I nodded, but deep down, I wasn't sure that's what it was. The way that figure had just stood there, the way they never spoke, it didn't feel like someone trying to wrong me. It felt like someone waiting. Underscore 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 the ending. The next morning, I went outside to check in the daylight. The driveway was damp with dew, the air sharp with cold, and that's when I saw it. On the porch, near the doormat, was a small piece of paper folded neatly in half. No envelope, no writing on the outside. I hesitated, then picked it up. Inside, in shaky handwriting, were 3 words, "You looked out." That was it. No name, no message, just that. I don't know who wrote it, or why, but I do know one thing: they were right. If I hadn't looked out, if I'd opened the door that first time out of habit or curiosity, I might never have known how close that stranger really was. Thank you for listening. These true scary stranger stories remind us how fragile that thin line between safety and fear can be. How a simple knock, a quiet tap, or a glance in the mirror can linger in your thoughts long after the moment has passed. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to subscribe for more calm, atmospheric horror. And if you're listening before sleep, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and remember, strangers pass us every day. Most never mean harm, but sometimes one does. Good night.